I'm thrilled to be here. Looking out at the crowd, we're literally at a standing room only. There are some seats if people want to come in, if you don't mind, reduced person space, but there's room. So first, General Walsh, thanks for that introduction. And secondly, thanks to Mayor Ron for taking the time to come out here to say welcome to all of us and to all of you for coming out for this Modeling and Sim Summit. As you can imagine, he's a very busy man, and he is very engaging out in the community. He apologized, hey, I can't stay because I've got another thing to go to. I'm like, I totally get it. Thanks for taking the hour to be here from that perspective. So, but what I want to do is go through some thanks first and then really have a conversation with you about the theme of the summit this week, which I'm grateful for. But first and foremost, Mr. Tempolsky, I really, really appreciate your leadership at the department level and your vision and your idea for us to sort of co-host this event. And my intent really is to bring sort of an operator end user perspective to this and bridge with the industry, if you will, and policy to understand where we have opportunities to do that. So thanks for allowing us to do this. I really, really do appreciate it. For Ms. Debbie Langelier, NTSA, thanks for organizing this and putting it together. Again, no easy feat. It's professionals do logistics, and if you can't get that right, you can't execute a successful anything. So we know how much that involves. To Miss Leah Kirkwood, you're here from the AFLICMIC. Thanks for being here as well. Simulation is in your wheelhouse in terms of the acquisition side from that perspective. Our Chief Learning Officer is here. Dr. Walsh, thanks for being here. Obviously, my Command Chief and right-hand man, Chief Bickley, thanks for being here with me on this. And to the modeling and sim world, frankly, a lot of good friends out here, and old co-workers and some leaders. Thanks for being here to go through this with you, Mr. Schatz, again. I've worked for you 3 times in our younger lives, and it's good to be sharing time with you here again today. A little bit about my intent. What I want to do here in the time with you is I really want to get to a conversation. So I'll try to keep this to, my standard rule is about 1/3 transmit, 2/3 Q&A or discussion. That's really where I want to go. But my intent is really, with the theme that we have for this in training in a digital world, is really get at what it means to Air Education Training Command and where we see ourselves and where we need to go on behalf of the United States Air Force. You'll find throughout the discussion here that a lot of this isn't new, but training is really what gives the United States military, in our case, the Air and Space Force, the secret sauce that we have. To be clear, because I know there's 1 or 2 Guardians in the room, I want to make sure I correct something to 100%. We do recruiting for Guardians. The training for Guardians is largely shifting over to the Space Force. There is a interdependent relationship with that, particularly in the professional military education space, that I want to keep because we are super dependent on each other. And so does General Sheba, feels the same way. But as often as when I was asked in 2019-ish, when we were having this conversation in the Pentagon about Space Force, from some friends, I said, it's time. Right? Just like it was in the Army Air Corps days. So I appreciate what you do. So I can go to the next slide real quick. Training is how we get it done. The theme you'll hear as I go through this discussion with you is, one, we've been here before. General Walsh mentioned that, the first flight 114 years ago, that there is a picture of Lackland Air Force Base today with General Hap Arnold on the dawn of us entering World War II. And, what he's telling the airmen that are out there, we're going to win this war through training, World War II in that case. The nature of warfare is the same. The character of warfare and conflict and competition has changed. The character of the defense industrial base has changed, right? In this day and age, it was largely manufacturing thousands and thousands of bombers and fighters and apparatus for them to train on. If anybody's seen Masters of the Air, there's a scene in there where the bombardiers are learning how to use the Norton bomb sight. That took place in this city on the military installations we have. That's where that class was being taught. So there's a rich history with training in the U.S. military, particularly in the aviation space. So I have the pleasure of serving the men and women of Air Education Training Command and trying to set them up and enable them to be successful. We're an institutional command in the way of force development, and what I mean by that is we set the foundation for airmen we have first touch with them. That's why we're called the first command. So from recruitment contact through initial skills training, basic military training, reserve officer training corps, school, the academy, USAFA. All of that happens. The academy doesn't happen as a direct result of us, but the concept is the same, where they're training and developing the future leaders and future members of our force. Our job is to make sure they're mission ready, they're competent, capable, confident, that they're ready and duly trained and aptly trained to go out and do their mission. We do that, though, by, with, and through systems, technologies, learning spaces, learning technologies that are commensurate and need to be commensurate with the digital age. And that's what we're trying to transition to. But we take very seriously the number of touch points we have for institutional training, as well as advanced training when they come back to Air Education Training Command, in many cases through Air University and the ways of professional military education. But it's not an easy task, as many that are in the business know. But if we don't get it right in this day and age and at the speed of relevance, we run the risk of, one, it's our greatest strategic challenge. And if we don't get it right, if we're not timely, we actually run the risk of being irrelevant or having an irrelevant force, warfighting force to put forward. First, to deter, to give any other adversary the thought about, hey, I don't think I want to take on the U.S. military. Secondly, if they do, to understand that we're gonna bring it to you as the United States military and the Air Force in this case. So we're in a transformative phase. We're in a transformative phase as AETC and as the Department of the Air Force, both organizationally to reoptimize, but we're also in a transformative phase with how we understand the technology that's available that we can put to use, and it's just accelerating at an exponential pace. We have to improve through that training our airmen's resilience, their warfighting character, the strength of their warfighting character and their competencies, then the confidence that they can do that. They have to, in this day and age, know and feel and understand that they can operate in an uncertain, ambiguous, and oftentimes disconnected environment, that they are well trained enough and have enough understanding of the commander's intent that they know what the most correct next decision to make is. Some of that comes from having a sense of the situation around them. A lot of it comes from rehearsals, mission rehearsal, and the like. Anyone who remembers the Operations Allies Refuge, you saw that time and time again. Very rapidly evolving situation. Yes, lots of chaos. But what you didn't see if you weren't in the mix was airmen down to the aircraft commander, in some cases staff sergeant level, having to make a call in the field, on the point, without calling back to the higher headquarters and asking, can I do this or should I do this? They would call back and say, here's what I did. That's exactly how it happened dozens and dozens of times. So we need to make sure they're successful in that environment. Our airmen, our guardians, they are our comparative advantage. The United States military, the Air Force, particularly our NCO Corps, have been the envy of many other militaries throughout history since World War II. Why? Because we train them, we empower them, we trust them to make decisions that they need to make to be successful. Most other militaries, particularly the ones who are concerned with the pacing challenge or adversaries, they're worried about, a simple example, in the PRC and I think even in Russia, an officer signs over an aircraft to a pilot, not a staff sergeant. I met a crew chief about a year ago at Holloman Air Force Base, and as they introduced me to her, they said, hey, sir, you just know that she's Airman Smith, generic name, is working her way through, halfway through her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. She's a crew chief on an F-16. I go, why chemical engineering? I was interested. She goes, well, one, I love chemistry, and two, it's just math. That's the talent over and over again you find in our United States Air Force and our military, frankly. So we need to make sure they're ready to be credible, combat capable, and out there, and they understand how to use high-end systems and take advantage of a high-end environment. And what I mean when I say high-end, I mean rapidly evolving, gross amounts of information coming at you, volumes of information coming at you in a very short period of time, and have to make sense of that situation to figure out what the best thing is to do. And understand, it's a system of systems. Nothing that I found in my 36 and a half years in the military, there is no element in our Air Force anyway that operates independently of another. We have not found a single force element or a single thing that can reign successfully on the battlefield and the battle space all on its own. It's about the interdependencies. So in that way, we're responsible for giving those airmen their institutional, occupational skills, but also more importantly, there's a set of 24 foundational competencies that every airman, we strive to make sure they understand and they're proficient at. to be successful in this environment. And there's a subset of those that are particularly identified to be consequential in the space of competing with, and perhaps if we had to, going into conflict with the PRC or pacing challenge. That's where we are. The modeling and simulation community is at the heart of our ability to do this faster, at equal or better quality, with more efficacy in that space. And it's going to be, has been, and will continue to be very, very integral in what it is that we're doing. So my message from here on out applies not just as much to the men and women in uniform in here, and the end users that are seeking ideas, thoughts, what's in the art of possible, as it does to industry as well, right? We need that dialogue. We have to get past the point where senior leaders at the commander level are saying one thing almost ubiquitously across the force, and then industry comes to talk with the staffs to try to get after the work, and they run into hedgerows and headwinds and brick walls, right? So we need to understand how to adapt policy and how to adapt approaches and where the trade space really is. So let me talk a little bit about great power competition briefly on that. And largely I would say, there's significant changes in a multi-domain threat environment. You hear about it all the time in the information space, the space domain, the cyber domain. I can tell you now, if you're not paying attention, the competition with the PRC right now is happening, I like to say, at the speed of sound. It's happening in space, it's happening in cyber, it's happening in information. That's going on present day. And it will continue if we get into conflict, if we're not able to deter. Those domains will still be preeminent based on the tyranny of distance, particularly with the Pacific Theater. So from an airman's perspective, and AETC's perspective, we're out of time. We have to continue to accelerate, innovate, and put these technologies to work in the way we train and educate the institutional responsibilities we have for our airmen. We've got to give them the digital age systems, the digital age learning spaces, the digital age learning facilities, and the learner-centric, airman-centric approach to education that they all come out of school. I shouldn't say all. I got schooled correctly on the Hill with that one because there are some that don't get the benefit of this, and that's actually accurate. But many of the folks that come to the Air Force and the ones that we seek and qualify to come into the Air Force as a Space Force, many of them have learned through their formative years, their primary education, in some cases their secondary education through a different format, and then we have to continue to propagate that forward, not take them backwards to legacy approaches from that perspective. So as we try to figure out how to go after these approaches, the things that we're concerned about are, it's hard to turn these methods of training and educating into things that programmers in the Air Force understand, right? They understand dollars. They want to balance the checkbook or what's the trade-off. That's not wrong, it's just the way it is. We have to work harder, we can use your help with that. So can AETC take a more effective way of training and educating and get to a cost-neutral position because you're turning in fixed infrastructure for agile mobile devices that are learning-centric, or the connectedness that allows that to happen? Can we increase through that methodology and how we present forces when we go out on exercises in that way, the adversary and pacing challenges perspective of our responsiveness, our readiness, and cause a rightward shift in deterrence, allow that to go further down track from that perspective. I already mentioned that competition's happening at the speed of light. If that doesn't succeed, ramping up for conflict is going to happen at the speed of light and the speed of sound. Why do I say that? Because to move forces around the Pacific Theater or to project power into the Pacific Theater is going to happen via air at the speed of sound, because we won't have the amount of time that we'd like, that we historically have taken to move the preponderance of force that we need into position to put our team on the side of the field of strife. One thing the adversaries learned about us, watching us over time, if you give us the 5 or 6 months to bring all the kit to the table, you've got something really significant to deal with. So the answer is, don't afford the opposing team the chance to bring the whole team to the field. And so that's what we expect will happen. So that mile marker for the PRC in particular is not very far down the field, right? For them to challenge the US military specifically in the South China Sea and or in the Western Pacific. And this competition is an infinite game clock. It's not a finite game clock. It's hard to put your hand on what the theory, the definition of victory looks like. Not too long, well, maybe not too long ago, but I think there was a time we said, hey, we won the Cold War, right? That's what we said when the Soviet Union collapsed. Well, number 2 pacing challenge is Russia, formerly known as the Soviet Union. So we did meet the objectives we needed, but again, it still continues. And we see that playing out in Ukraine, and we need to learn the lessons we see coming from that. And this community can help us with that because it will continue. And I mentioned that we won't get the time to choose. We may not have the time to choose when that happens. We have to be ready, and we have to accelerate that readiness. We have roughly 1/10 or 10 to 15% of the United States Air Force's end strength is tied up in training in any given day. I don't know of any airman that I found who said, I'd like to spend another day in training more than I have to. I want to get to my operational unit. So we need the technologies and the ways to get them through and make sure they're ready and out there contributing to the readiness of the force and deterrence. Next slide, please. So I mentioned demonstrating the readiness. We've got to take advantage continually of the modeling and simulation capacities and technologies that are there. This is a variation of what we'd otherwise call in operational speak the OODA loop, orient, organize, decide, and act. This gives a little more specificity what we're looking to do. But what I tell you though is this represents what we need to do through modeling and simulation and data. Yes, I do have data figuratively tattooed on the back of my right shoulder blade. I see Colonel Dillenberger out there somewhere over there, my A9, he knows that. We have to be able to understand how well we are doing with regard to delivering learning to the individual level, to the airmen, right? Are they grasping the concepts? Are their competencies coming along and developing? And then how does that spill out to the rest of the force? We also have to use this concept through data and analytics at the macro level in the system of systems. How well is the system of production? In the end, a very simplistic view for AATC, we're just a production model. We produce airmen. The intent is to produce them with the right qualities, competencies, so they can be combat warfighting ready when they step out into the force. So we rely on your ability to rapidly develop and deploy the training technology that allows us to get there and the ability to measure our progress. So let me give you a few examples of where we've come so far with the technology that exists today. And we know we're not there and done yet, but obviously I think a lot are aware, both in the civilian world and militarily, with the modeling and simulation capacities with medical community, right? So the idea of you can practice trauma care, combat casualty treatment in a simulation environment that replicates enough of the pressure, the sensory inputs, things of that nature. You'll hear a panel of that on Thursday, panel number 5 on Thursday. How we use artificial intelligence and wargaming to replicate that decision-making of an adversary that's going to give us hundreds of decision points to tackle in a small amount of time versus roll the dice, adjudicate, next move, next move. Not that that's not relevant, but it's not the whole solution these days. How can we get after that using large language models and artificial intelligence, maybe augmented by machine learning? I mentioned learning spaces. Our tech training dorms are also learning spaces for our airmen who are initial skills training. They're just not dormitories. So for one example, what we have found at 2nd Air Force, particularly at Keesler Air Force Base, turns out air traffic control initial skills training is a difficult course to pass for valid reason. If anybody's been in a passenger airplane, you want to make sure those air traffic controllers are doing their job very well, so you don't have mid-air collisions or controlled flight in terrain. So what we've done is, what 2nd Air Force has done is move the simulation lab, if you will, which is some servers and screens and things that replicate their job in the tower cab, taken the pool tables out of the day room and put those systems in the day room. So on Saturday or Sunday, if they have the time or are inclined to go practice again at their time and not depend solely on the instructor's schedule. And we've seen the pass rate and the graduation rate come up. We've actually employed and this is actually kind of amazing, through VR, AR technologies, how to train a military working dog trainer without an actual live dog. Right? That's better in wear and tear on the training dogs, and those airmen, those defenders actually learn how to handle those dogs, and it's actually pretty amazing. As well as the shoot, move, communicate tactics that are necessary to operate as a cohesive unit, either protecting your base here in the CONUS should it be needed, or operating at a forward operating location out in the system in the Western Pacific. Avionics technicians or maintainers through AR and VR modalities. They've learned how to get the right quality, and they've shaved, roughly 20 days off the syllabus. That's money in terms of man days, and that's time that they're out of training and onto their mission from there. That is incredible. I met a maintainer at the 82nd at Shepherd who designed a, quote, virtual instructor using ChatGPT. They bounded it, right? Because that was when there was a lot of talk about, the bias and data that comes in, and it has these hallucinations, things of that nature. So I'm like, how are you doing that? And they brought that in, and they bounded it to Air Force instructions, tech orders, job manuals, and such. And it was a maintenance course, right? So I thought I'd be clever. And they said, sir, ask it a question, give it a prompt. So I asked it a dress and appearance question, like, how do I wear my uniform? And darned if it didn't give me the right answers on dress and appearance. I'm like, okay. I said, hey, how did you learn how to do this? Because I do this for fun. I do it on Saturdays. It's been something I've been getting after. Again, the talent is among us, is with us, and we've got to get after it. So those are some examples. We borrowed a lot of that from our UPT 2.5 and learn how to train more innovatively with aviation training. So we've learned a lot of things, concepts in that space, and decided to flip that over on tech school training. The concepts are there. It might not be the same direct tool or approach with the tool, but the concept transfers, and we've been getting after that pretty heavily. We're now exploring in aviation training, hey, what do we need to look for to train a pilot in 5th gen aviation versus just aviation? And there is a difference. A number of our partner air forces around the world are going after that already. Many of them screen pilot candidates because they have much smaller budgets and the ability to waste, but they're transitioning to 5th gen forces as a totality, the proportion of their force faster than we are. They screen up front, not just your hand-eye coordination and dexterity and your aptitude. They're looking for how you handle large amounts of volume and decision-making coming at you, which is what a 5th gen platform will do for you and present to you as an operator of that platform. So they're looking at those kinds of things, and we're going to continue to get after that. We're looking at remote sim instruction. We have a hard time getting folks to want to be, willingly to be assigned at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. It's a fantastic environment, but it's remote and isolated. In many circumstances, people don't want to be there or they can't be there based on healthcare that's available. So how do we use technology to bridge that gap so we still have the right amount of instructors capability to teach our airmen that are learning flying training? So the desired future state of AATC, if I go to the next slide, is how do we modernize our training, leverage the industry strengths that we have before us and the capacity, link the why and the how students learn to and drive the efficacy with how quickly they can learn and we can develop. We haven't done our best in AATC in defining and codifying and stating out loud the value of cognition in learning. And a lot of these technology tools we have today, they up the value, the pace, the intensity of cognition, which is what I think accelerates it. I'm not a specialist in that space, but as I've read about this rather, and thought about it, it's there. And I'd rather figure this out, what I call it the ground speed of 0 before taxi or takeoff, because the first picture I showed you was on the dawn, the United States had decided we're going to enter World War II. And they're in the point of like, hey, we're going to train, we know we got to train more, let's figure out how we do it. I want to figure it out now so that when that call comes, if that call comes for us, that we have bought down risk because we already know the optimum ways, and we'll still have to make some cuts in that space, some reductions there, but we can do better in that space today in the competition phase. So for following through, as General Alvin's charged us with, we're continuing to get after deliberate integration, being agile and adaptive. We want rapid execution, and it's really about mission over function. Not specifically just what does a particular specialty need, but what is the presentation of the force that we're going to put out there to fight a fight in a certain environment? What does that totality of that force need to be able to operate as a team and be successful? So this summer at AATC, we're going to stand up several centers of excellence. You'll probably hear about those through time at the MAGCOM level and the numbered Air Force level. And the intent is for them to work with industry, academia, and the learning, engineering, learning design spaces to figure out what we should be employing, what we should be going after in that space. And then how do we set it up in a way that we can continue to iterate with, maybe not at the pace of Moore's Law, but we can no longer accept, hey, this is good for 10 years. That is not acceptable, at least to me. And if we're going to do a 10-year thing, I intend to build into it incentives for industry to actually innovate along the way from that perspective. But we're not going to build a 10-year static, put it on the shelf, and we'll come back and deal with it later. But it's important for us to work together in that space. And that's part of the message for industry and for our Air Force, right? Our airmen are charged with going after those kind of perspectives, those attributes in the vehicles that we're going to get after. Industry, we need your ideas for that. Our capability has long been derived from the collective ability to produce and utilize industry as our backbone. The industrial base, the definition of that I think is changing. It's not as heavy in the way of manufacturing. We're not going to build 12,000 bombers like we did in World War II. We're not going to have 1,000 bombers aloft at any one day like we had in World War II. Why? Because we don't own 1,000 bombers, right? Perhaps we could get to a place that it's that existential that we sort to, the United States recalibrates, but we don't expect that that ought not be the primary course of action. The other thing I think that's, and I've talked with Ms. Kirkwood about this, some time ago, but I think the definition of what we define as simulation has changed, that is blurred. We generally, maybe it's just my bias with these wings on my chest, but we generally look at simulation as Class D devices, full motion simulators, but we have shown in UPT Next and UPT 2.5 that it is not just that. It is the intermediate training device that doesn't move, or is a device that has just enough motion coupled with all your sensory inputs to make you think well enough and give you sort of suspended reality or suspended disbelief. What does that mean to us, and how should we change in that space to get after that? Does it mean it has to elevate to a program, definition of a program today in Air Force acquisition parlance or not? But we need your help as airmen and guardians to move forward on this. We need to understand what's in the art of possible. That's why I take the time to go visit industry and frankly other air forces as well to see what they're putting into play. So from the modeling and simulation community, we desire more collaborative opportunities like these. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. We're seeing examples in Ukraine where, or even in the Red Sea with the Hamas-Gaza war, where the cost curve, I was talking with somebody yesterday, where the cost is inverted. We're spending multi-millions of dollars to defend against hundreds of thousands of dollar threats. In some cases, not even that expensive unless you try to figure out adding up the manpower and the server stacks in the information space. But we are upside down, and that's not sustainable. So we need to enhance our ability to do that through the training methods that we deliver, technology, the understanding of how well an individual student is learning, and let them progress on their pace, not on the bell curve of this is how long it takes to learn this particular skill. And then to be able to scale that up and in the macro sense in the data and analytics and understand how the system writ large is performing. We don't have time to waste and accept wasted time in training pipelines, substandard developmental paths and training paths. And I'll end with, by the way, that training and development's a shared ecosystem. It doesn't just exist in AETC. It is shared by us and the operational force. We get the foundation set. But what makes our Air Force the greatest that it is the operational force also trains. They go to red flag, they go to large force exercises, they have exercises on their base. These approaches will spill over, but they get more into the application much more so than we do for operational purpose. What area of responsibility is my wing assigned to? What tasks do I have? What designed operational capability statement do I have for my wing? What are we expected to do? So in conclusion, what I'd say is, the modeling simulation community and AETC have immense roles and interdependence in how we help the Air Force and the Space Force focus on the great power competition to make sure that we're ready and we're doing our very best. The deliberate integration, embracing agility and adaptive innovations, solutions, digitally transforming. The U.S. Air Force can enhance our readiness and effectiveness in the face of these evolving threats. It's absolutely possible. We've seen it. But you are at the cornerstone of AETC student production capability and capacity. We do rely on your expertise and partnership. One thing I've learned from working with the industry is we don't have the right skilled workforce in AETC. So we have given a directive to our organization that we are going to digitally upskill our force, which means we're going to go in the bureaucratic way and put new requirements on positions about skills our airmen, civilians, uniform members have to have. And then we're going to provide them the educational resources if they want to go get it. I can order the military members to go get it. The civilians they get a vote, but we're going to make sure they have the opportunity to get it if they are so interested in doing it. But I can tell you, our young men and women that are coming in today, they have it. We bound them, we bind them, we don't let them free and let them flourish and show us what they can do. So with that, thank you again. I'll stop here and really get into Q&A. Hopefully I've generated some questions or thoughts, perspectives, and really just want to have a conversation for the remaining balance of the time. But thanks for your time here. Thanks for coming here to do this, and I really look forward to the next 3 days. Thank you very much.